She steered west to outrun grief, and somewhere under the evergreens the road erased her. In the spring of 2000, a young woman vanished, leaving behind a wrecked Jeep, a paper trail of careful intentions, and a silence that has lasted for decades. Leah Roberts was 23, a bright, stubbornly independent North Carolinian who had weathered the death of her mother and not long after the decline and loss of her father. Friends say she coped by planning movement. She read Jack Kerouac until the bindings frayed and kept a pocket notebook of quotes and routes. In early March, she told those closest to her she needed time to think. A white Jeep Cherokee sat under the pines outside her Durham home, packed with clothes, a sleeping bag, and the kind of small comforts people bring when they expect to wake somewhere unfamiliar. Her tabby cat was left with her roommates, a tender sign that she believed she would return. On her dresser, she left a brief note about heading toward the mountains. She withdrew cash, put film in a camera, and traced stars on a road atlas from North Carolina to the Pacific Northwest. The handwriting in her travel notes was tidy, almost clinical. Fuel stops, a reminder to check oil, a list of lookouts near Mount Baker. She was healthy, restless, and newly unmoored, a person both prepared and vulnerable, the kind of traveler who brings a favorite scarf and a spare spark plug, and believes the right road can answer hard questions. What follows is what is known, and how those fragments were stitched together by people who refused to let a vanished stranger become a closed file. Leah left Durham around March 9, 2000, steering onto I-40 with her atlas in the passenger seat and a small roll of cash tucked in a coin pouch. Surveillance cameras caught her at ATMs drawing funds in measured amounts, never reckless, always within the plan set out in her travel notes. Receipts recovered later sketched a path westward through Tennessee and the plains, then up along I-5. In Washington, the paper trail sharpened, a gas purchase in the Bellingham area, a cafe receipt, and a movie ticket dated March 13th tucked among glove box clutter, placing her alive and moving in the community that sits in the shadow of snowbound volcanic peaks. Her notes had named Mount Baker Country, Desolation Peak, Fur Roads, Lookout Views as destinations, a pilgrimage to the landscapes that shaped the books she loved. 5 days later, road workers driving a washed-out gravel spur called Canyon Creek Road looked downslope and saw a white shape pressed into alder and moss. It was Leah's Jeep, resting on its side in a pocket of brush, panels bent, radiator long cooled. Inside lay clothes, a blanket rigged like a curtain, and food, items a traveler would want if she had turned the car into a temporary shelter. There were no obvious signs of a struggle, no blood visible, no purse in sight. The road above ended abruptly at a collapse in the earth. The Jeep appeared to have gone beyond a barrier, then tumbled. The scene told a story in dents and placements, but it was not a simple accident narrative. That is where investigators began, following the receipts and the notes back from the cliff edge toward the person who wrote them. Deputies from the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office sealed off the brushy slope the day the Jeep was found and worked it like a quiet crime scene, even before deciding what crime, if any, had occurred. They photographed tread impressions in the gravel, measured the angle of descent, and mapped debris. Accident specialists looked for brake gouges and fresh scrape marks, the physics that reveal speed and intent. Technicians dusted the door handles and interior plastics for prints, lifted latent impressions with powder and tape, and bagged them for comparison. They swabbed for trace biologicals, mindful that in 2000 DNA testing was reliable but still dependent on quantity and preservation. Touch DNA was not yet routine, and blood typing, while useful, could not identify a person without a sample to match. The seatbelt webbing was inspected for fiber distortion that shows a body under load. Investigators noted signs consistent with the belt not being worn at impact. Airbags and their sensors were examined to guess how and whether the Jeep was occupied, another inference rather than a certainty. The ignition showed unusual marks, and a relay in the starting system drew attention. A mechanic later told detectives it looked as if someone had interfered with it. In the glove box and footwell, receipts and a March 13th movie stub fixed Leah's presence in Bellingham days before. Search and rescue teams fanned out from the crash, working contour lines and grid patterns, tracking dogs following scent down the logging road toward the main route before losing it in a tangle of traffic smell. Not proof, but consistent with someone leaving in another vehicle. Helicopters scanned for thermal hits, divers checked nearby water crossings, and the sheriff's office staged brief roadside contacts with drivers, a soft version of a checkpoint, to ask if anyone had seen a young woman hiking or hitching. No body meant no autopsy. Instead, her dental records and fingerprints were cataloged and ready, a standing comparison set for any future unidentified remains. Detectives built two investigative tracks, the stranger scenario and the inner circle possibility. In Durham, Leah's roommates and close friends were interviewed, alibis checked against work logs and phone records. They described a young woman who had been honest about taking a break and who left her cat and rent covered. None had been in Washington. Their prints and DNA volunteered and compared to the Jeep's lifts without a match. Her brother and sister were questioned with care and cleared through travel documentation and corroboration. In Washington, interviews widened. Road workers who found the Jeep, hikers, and cafe staff in Bellingham who might have served Leah around March 13th were canvassed. One witness recalled a young woman talking about Kerouac with a bearded man at a roadside diner. A composite sketch circulated quietly, and prints from known local offenders were run through AFIS against the seatbelt buckle and interior lifts. No hit. Years later, when technology improved, a male profile was reported from touch DNA on a garment collected from the Jeep, then compared to acquaintances. Again, no match and no entry in national databases. A rumored trucker sighting, helping a woman jumpstart a Jeep days before, was traced and interviewed. His rig's logs put him elsewhere at the critical time. Investigators also pressed the voluntary flight idea. Leah's passport was missing, cash had been withdrawn, and her notes signaled intention rather than panic. But there was a confounding fact pattern. No new bank activity, no social security use, no verified sightings after the receipts. The community absorbed the shock. Volunteer teams returned on weekends, churches held vigils, and campus groups back in North Carolina organized flyer drives. Parents cautioned students about solo road trips, and Whatcom County fielded calls from hikers reporting every lone campfire. Fear did not turn to curfew, but it tightened routines and expectations in trailhead parking lots and college apartments alike. The story moved from police blotter to print columns, then to studio lights. Local headlines in the Bellingham Herald asked where a careful traveler had gone. Seattle tabloids leaned on wilderness peril. East Coast papers framed the journey as a cross-country dream gone wrong. Radio talk shows host-floated theories of staged wrecks and shadowy hitchhikers, and the case later drew national cable coverage on true crime programs that braided Leah's notebooks and the mountain road into a mythic disappearance. Publicity brought tips and noise in equal measure. Detectives learned that the more cameras pointed at a cold trail, the more they had to spend time sorting wishful certainty from fact. The investigation's legacy is not one thunderclap revelation, but a set of steady refinements. Agencies in North Carolina and Washington tightened protocols for adult missing persons, pushing faster NCIC entries and faster cross-state record sharing. Search managers in Whatcom County rewrote how they treat roadside crashes that might be stages, balancing accident reconstruction with victimology when personal effects remain. Evidence from Leah's Jeep has been revisited as forensic science matured. Latent prints rescanned through upgraded AFIS, touch DNA reevaluated, and new comparisons made when persons of interest enter the system. Journalists who covered her case developed better language for uncertainty, tempering headline drama with procedural detail. And still, the essentials endure. A woman who loved words and mountains prepared a journey with care, wrote a plan, and left a trail that ends at a battered truck under fir trees. In that gap between written intention and physical wreckage, Possibilities proliferate. An opportunistic predator, a companion turned dangerous, a misadventure that became concealment. The file remains open, the notes preserved, the Jeep photographed from every angle, waiting for one more piece of evidence to turn a wilderness question into an answer.